Welcome to another entry from the Omni-Bestiary. As we enter the 10th episode of our little series, I reflected on each of the magnificent specimens that we've studied so far, and I noticed that there was a recurring theme that consistently emerged in our talks. No, not... Actually, yeah, that did pop up a lot, but what I was thinking of was the subject of genetic manipulation. Whether it be selectively breeding to emphasize traits, to clone creatures to preserve them, from spontaneous unpredictable mutations to carefully spliced hybrid organisms, many animals in the Omni-Bestiary, in some way, have had their genome influenced by human intervention. Of course, viewers of this show would be aware that humans weren't careful with some of these examples, and wound up having to deal with immense death and destruction from beasts exempt from the rules of natural selection. So on that note, I thought it would be appropriate for today's entry that we take a look at what is, in my opinion, the single most dangerous creature created by human hands. The killer penguin. The killer penguin hails from an alternate version of Earth, where zoological parks wound up becoming the world's most popular recreational destinations. While this yielded many positives for this world, like promoting enthusiasm and support toward wildlife conservation, a need to continuously draw in guests led to edition after edition of increasingly intricate attractions. New exhibits, animal tours, aquariums, animal shows. These crowd pleasers kept getting bigger and bigger until they made the drastic step of turning toward the revival and exhibition of extinct species. Upon financing the development of modern cloning techniques, these zoos were able to restore these lost animals, from those that were recently lost as the Thylacine, all the way back to prehistoric creatures like theropod and ceratopsid dinosaurs. Fortunately for the zoo attendees, they were effectively able to keep them safely contained in their enclosures, unlike a certain island resort. However, in the DNA replication labs, a completely different complication emerged. While most geneticists handled the cloning procedure skillfully, the more incompetent scientists haphazardly contaminated the DNA samples during the process, resulting in the germination of some unanticipated specimens. Sure, most of them were just harmless, albeit gigantic, clones of common organisms, but, as you've probably guessed, they occasionally wound up with the sinister egg of a killer penguin. The killer penguin is a genetic amalgam of indeterminate origin. However, genomic tests, as well as the distinctive feathered crest on its head, confirm that it is in fact a member of genus Eutapes, which encompasses what are known as crested penguins. One particular species of crested penguin, the rockhopper penguin, is a commonly distributed animal amongst this world's zoos, making it the likely foundation in the creation of the killer penguin. Although rockhoppers are usually among the planet's smaller penguin species, standing at around 22 inches or 56 centimeters, the killer penguin towers over them, as you can see here where I'm positioned next to this scale model. Wait, Oh god, that's a model, right? Comparing their heights implies that adult killer penguins are approximately 5 foot 3 inches, or 161 centimeters tall, meaning it stands above all other penguin species, including the world's tallest naturally occurring penguin, the noble emperor penguin of Antarctica. Coincidentally, many believe that the DNA of some unusually aggressive emperors were mixed into the killer penguin's genetic soup, which would explain their terrifying disposition. Whilst these creatures are known to enjoy relaxing walks against the sunset of the Arctic beach, this hobby is merely a distraction from its abilities as a ludicrously savage hunter, capable of overwhelming his quarry by pecking it to death with its toothed beak. While some birds of prey have what is known as tomial teeth, which is just basically an additional serrated edge on their beak to tear through flesh, the killer penguin's teeth more likely came from the inclusion of prehistoric DNA that reintroduced this vestigial part lost in the evolution of the penguin. You see, the members of class Aves, or birds, and their common ancestors are in fact classified under a clade of dinosaurs known as the Maniraptorans. Under the pressures of natural selection, the offspring of the most ancient of the Maniraptorans gradually wound up with body parts more indicative of the modern bird, such as reduced bony tails, feathers, and a more avian skeletal structure. These evolutionary influences also affected their teeth, and those who survived without them, something that researchers found yielded the benefit of a faster embryonic development speed, were able to pass on their genes to the next generation, thus promoting the emergence of the modern-day toothless avian beak. However, the reintroduction of DNA from a more intermediate animal with both a beak and teeth, like, say, a prehistoric seabird like Hesperornis, appears to have reactivated the long-dormant genes involved in avian tooth development, granting the killer penguin its razor-sharp dentition. Teeth or no teeth, the killer penguin is still nevertheless a grave threat to all forms of life around it. Even behind the most sturdy of enclosure walls, zoo guests donate funds to its care solely out of fear, in the hopes their offering would appease it. Heck, the only real reason why zoos even exhibit this beast in the first place is because they just can't safely get rid of it. Either because it would destroy everything around it if we release it to the wild, or because no zoo curator is crazy enough to adopt one of them. Some have even tried to get out of their hair by pawning it off a poor, unsuspecting fool under the guise of a free penguin donation. There were attempts to placate the specimen's destructive tendencies with various forms of enrichment, though the only enrichment they seem to comprehend is hunting for live prey. Penguins are already equipped with tools that make them keen marine predators, with their streamlined torpedo-like shape, shorter feathers with reduced drag, and wings and paddle feet, grant them great underwater speed and maneuverability. There are also another species who possess counter-shaded camouflage, a topic that we discussed in our previous episode on Acro the Orca. Their counter-shaded coat of feathers, with one side being pitch black and the other bright white, allows them to hide from their prey depending on their viewing angle. While penguins tend to feast on krill, fish, and squid, the killer penguin can, believe it or not, take down significantly larger marine organisms. Dolphins? Whales? Even my fellow sharks can't handle this thing. In fact, although it should be physiologically impossible on paper, the killer penguin is nigh unstoppable on land as well. Bears can't overpower it. Cheetahs can't outrun it. Elephants can't stop it. Even the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex quivers before the sight of this devil. Because of this, we must be fortunate that the killer penguin possesses the intelligence to recognize it shouldn't bite the literal hands that feed it. Of course, it should come as no surprise to you that the exhibition of artificially created genetic amalgamations like the killer penguin is not currently ongoing in the zoos of your world. Firstly, because there's absolutely no way an accredited institution would even authorize such an ethically questionable practice in the first place, but more obviously because the technology to produce them isn't completely available. But what if I told you there are, in fact, actual programs to restore extinct animals going underway right now? Yes, although the type of technologies that created killer penguins isn't quite there yet, there are efforts to work on the original intended purpose behind it, to bring back animals that were once thought to be lost to us. Teams of scientists are working on projects that hope to reintroduce animals like the quagga, thylacine, and woolly mammoth. While some projects are comparatively simple, such as the quagga project's procedure to selectively breed plain zebras until they give birth to specimens that are genetically similar to this extinct subspecies, the other ones are debatably more intricate. The plan to recreate woolly mammoths involved using one of their preserved genetic samples in CRISPR genome editing, which, to put things rudimentally, is a technique that manipulates the virus-recognizing defense mechanisms of cells to alter or replace DNA segments. The Woolly Mammoth Project intends to incorporate their genetic samples into the stem cells of their closest living relative, the Asian elephant, which they hope can develop into the embryos of a reborn mammoth. The same thing is essentially being done for the thylacine, or Tasmanian tiger. Though despite its appearance and name, it's actually a species of marsupial that evolved predatory traits and behavior separately from big cats and canines. As such, they're trying to recreate the thylacine genome by piecing together their genetic samples and comparing it with those of currently living marsupial species. What this all means is that, if everything works out, this technology can be used to restore mammoths, thylacines, and pretty much any other extinct animal, as long as you have viable genetic samples to work with. But, unfortunately, I have some bad news for any of you dinosaur fans out there. It is not possible to reconstruct a prehistoric creature with this method, as the dino DNA has just simply degraded over the millions of years their fossils have lied out in the open, and are no longer viable for genome editing. They were able to do this with the mammoth and thylacine because they were able to get a hold of sufficiently preserved specimens, with the mammoth being frozen in permafrost and with the thylacine being available via museum samples. But for Tyrannosaurus rexes, sorry, no luck. Once these projects successfully have these creatures under their care, they actually plan to return them to the lands they once thrived in the hopes that they may reestablish a stable population. Now, although I personally question the logic behind placing the mammoth in a potentially incompatible ecosystem that has changed over the 4,000 years since it went extinct, the loss of both the quagga and the thylacine, and by extension the ecological roles they filled within the past 200 years or so, have left a gap in their home ecosystems. One that led to less overall biological diversity and unstable population shifts of their predators and prey. Compounding this issue is the fact that neither of these animals went extinct through natural means. The loss of both the quagga and thylacine are both blamed on human activity, either because of overhunting, habitat loss, or because of the introduction of invasive species that killed or outcompeted them. Dang, that topic really does pop up a lot, doesn't it? The really distressing part of this, however, is that this kind of science might eventually become a necessity for keeping nature in balance. You see, the ongoing habitat loss, pollution, climate change, poaching, and pesticide overuse going on throughout the world have caused sudden and drastic changes to Earth's biosphere that most animals are just simply incapable of adapting to quickly enough. Unless these human activities can be reasonably kept in check, more and more species will sadly become lost to us. To put things in perspective, at the time of writing this video, the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List of Threatened Species reports that 902 of the species they have recorded in this program since it started in 1964 have become extinct, and yet another 12,000 plus species are listed as possibly extinct. And because of limitations on how the IUCN Red List is able to gather data, especially with harder to track creatures like insects and ocean fish, these numbers might actually be much higher. In fact, this has led many of the scientific community to determine that we are in the midst of a man-made mass extinction event. And I fear that unless things can be turned around, one of the only ways we will continue to live in a world with these creatures is if we manufacture them in a lab and release them back into the wild. This, of course, isn't to say it's not a valid way to solve this conundrum. It's just unfortunate that we might reach a point where we need to resort to it. I simply hope that no matter how this technology will end up being used, that someone doesn't accidentally make a killer penguin from it. Bit of a dour note to go out on, but this is how we will conclude today's entry. Thank you for joining me once again. As usual, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss out on any future entries, as well as my random nonsense. I'm planning some big things in the near future, so I hope you look forward to it. But until then, take care, and Huh?